From dumpster diving to accidental manslaughter, we're counting down the most stomach-churning things Bikini Bottom's Starfish Menace has ever done. And it all starts at the Bikini Bottom Mall, where SpongeBob and Patrick are feeling cute in their new shirts before things spiral into madness. It all kicks off at the Bikini Bottom Mall, where SpongeBob and Patrick are proudly trying on these cringy best friend shirts with arrows pointing to each other, which is pretty wholesome. Well, of course, things go sideways as soon as they realize those arrows also point at random strangers if they so much as turn a little.
No! You're not my best friend!
Security ends up having enough of their bloody chaos and boots them out. So, still on the hunt for new friendship gear, they spot a crowd decked out in military uniforms. Clearly, Patrick thinks this is the latest in matching fashion, but it's actually a historical reenactment of, you guessed it, the Battle of Bikini Bottom. Patrick, in all his messy glory, remembers this epic showdown as some kind of hygiene war, the clean versus the dirty.
That's not what happened.
Obviously, SpongeBob's all in with the clean team, but Patrick's like, nah, I'm repping the filthy side. And by filthy, I mean disgusting. We're talking the kind of hygiene nightmare that'd make even a sea cucumber cringe. He's rolling around in grime, laughing in SpongeBob's face about his precious cleanliness, like the Krabby Patty sauce stains and ice cream dribbles are badges of honor. SpongeBob can't handle it, so he takes it upon himself to cleanse Patrick, which only escalates the shit show. Patrick retaliates by finding new, creative ways to gross SpongeBob out. First, he assaults him with a booger missile. Yes, that happened. Our Spongy Boy's screams reach a whole new pitch here. And honestly, same. Then Patrick's sporting some filthy ketchup-stained patty socks, and SpongeBob is mortified. SpongeBob, in a last-ditch attempt to bring hygiene justice, chugs a bar of soap and starts pelting Patrick with high-powered soap bubbles. And Patrick, he goes to the next level, my dudes, picking up a dumpster and tossing it like it's a feather, ready to bury SpongeBob in every rotting mystery of Bikini Bottom. It ends with the both of them swamped. SpongeBob is filthy, Patrick's squeaky clean, and they're both equally horrified and thrilled at their new states, which is exactly how I would describe coming to the bloody end of this episode. Patrick ends off with saying, and since I'm clean, I can get even filthier! After all that, they somehow make peace, probably because they're both too tired to keep throwing dumpsters. But honestly, this whole filthy ordeal, chef's kiss, Patrick. It's one of those moments where you wonder why SpongeBob bothers. Anyone willing to use a dumpster as a weapon probably isn't worth the hygiene trauma. And now it's time for a different kind of hygienic trauma. In Suds, Patrick doles out the worst medical advice known to undersea kind, proving once again that his loyalty might just be SpongeBob's biggest hazard. So the whole mess starts with SpongeBob dreaming of a Krabby Patty storm, which sends him stumbling to the kitchen for a midnight sea nut butter and jellyfish jelly sandwich. He passes out mid-sandwich and leaves his fridge open, which turns his pineapple house into Bikini Bottom's newest winter wonderland. By morning, SpongeBob wakes up with a bad case of the Suds, aka an underwater cold that makes him sneeze bubbles like a busted bubble machine. Gary's like, dude, stay home. But SpongeBob, dedicated as ever, heads to the Krusty Krab. This goes about as well as you'd expect. SpongeBob's sneezes have customers ducking for cover, and when Mr. Krabs hears from Gary that SpongeBob has the Suds, he practically kicks SpongeBob out, saying he doesn't want any sneezy fry cooks messing up his cash flow. Back at home, SpongeBob decides he needs help, so he calls up Sandy to take him to the doctor. But Patrick arrives, who's here to save the day with some terrible advice.
The doctor's office is a horrible, horrible place!
Patrick fills SpongeBob's head with horror stories about the doctor's office, claiming it's a torture chamber with torture devices and magazines from, like, last century. Terrified, SpongeBob begs Patrick to be his doctor instead, and here's where things go from gross to completely off the rails. Patrick's treatment plan? Plugging up all of SpongeBob's holes to stop the bubbles from leaking. The only result is SpongeBob swelling up like a squeaky beach ball every time he sneezes, turning him into a ticking time bomb, so to speak. The situation just gets worse, but Dr. Patrick's all in now, giving SpongeBob even more questionable treatments. Just when you think it can't get nastier, Sandy shows up and immediately sees through Patrick's doctor act. She tells SpongeBob he needs an actual doctor, but Patrick insists that he's got it handled, whatever the hell that means. The whole scene turns into a chaotic fight with SpongeBob bouncing around like a giant sneeze-powered beach ball. He ends up bouncing all the way back to the Krusty Krab, where one massive sneeze sends corks shooting out of his holes like a confetti cannon, filling the restaurant with bubbles and leaving Krabs absolutely livid, bras. Finally, Sandy drags SpongeBob to a real doctor who prescribes the legendary sponge treatment. Enter Hans the Human Hand, who gives SpongeBob the most deluxe scrub down ever. SpongeBob's loving it, getting rinsed and scrubbed, basically living his best life at a spa day. After his treatment, he's cured and gets a massive ass lollipop as a reward. Patrick's still lurking though, eyeing that lollipop like it's his next meal. Not to be outdone, Patrick fakes having the suds too, even blowing a bubble to prove his symptoms and coyly saying, "Hey doc, I got the suds too." The doctor's not buying it. Instead, Hans grabs Patrick and subjects him to his own sponge treatment, which is less spa day and more hardcore scrubbing the crapper duty. And Patrick getting dunked in a toilet might seem like rock bottom, but leave it to him to dig deeper. In No Nose Knows, Patrick's foray into the world of scent kicks off in Squidward's flower bed, and it only gets weirder from there. So here we go. Patrick's latest deep dive into the world of gross starts off pretty innocently. Squidward's just coming home hoping for a flower-smelling sesh, only to find Patrick and SpongeBob in his flower bed trying to smell his plants. But Patrick, my dude's got no nose. The guy can't sniff a damn thing. So, what does the starfish do? He dives right into Bikini Bottom's finest plastic surgery joint, noses and things, and gets himself a massive schnoz. Things just go downhill from there. The minute Patrick gets his nose, he's like an over-caffeinated bloodhound, sniffing everything within a 5-mile radius. Perfume, baked goods, grass, deodorant. It's all good until he hits those nasty-ass onion rings, and that's when Patrick's new super sense goes straight to his head. My dude just freaks out and scrambles on home, and even has the gall to say, "At least here at home I won't get attacked by those wretched odors," only for his new nostrils and our eyes to get assaulted by the horrors of inside Patrick's rock. It is a landscape of filth. Just everywhere. How does this dude live like this? This is close to a dump site at this rating. So Patrick does the ultimate pendulum swing. He goes from sloppy slob to cleanliness queen in 48 hours, destroying anything he finds even remotely stinky. He doesn't stop at his own place. Patrick becomes the stink sheriff of Bikini Bottom, going into clean mode on everyone else's stuff too. First, he fumigates his house like it's ground zero for a plague, scrubbing it down for 2 days. Then SpongeBob stops by and Patrick immediately smells something rank at Squidward's place. Patrick doesn't just toss Squidward's prized imported cheese, he blasts it to bits with a rocket launcher, leaving Squidward's dreams of fancy snacks in flaming tatters. Then Patrick storms into the Krusty Krab, basically trying to fumigate it with air freshener and candles, chasing off every customer in the process. And he doesn't stop there. He corks SpongeBob's holes to keep him from leaking odor, and sprays Sandy with more freshener than a pine tree air freshener factory. He turns everyone's life into one big disgusting cloud of too much. Naturally, everyone's done with Patrick's snobby nose routine, so they plan a unique intervention. They decide to hit Patrick with the worst smelling garbage pile in the ocean, and it works like a charm. One whiff and Patrick's brand new nose shrivels up and falls off, finally leaving everyone in peace. But Patrick, ever the drama queen, mourns his nose like he just lost his life's purpose, even throwing a little funeral.
Here lies the nose of Patrick Star, Rip.
Just as Squidward's ready to toast his nose-free life, Patrick shows up with a massive ear, now ready to eavesdrop on all of them instead. If Patrick's nose turned Bikini Bottom into a nightmare, SpongeBob's here to say, "Challenge accepted," because nothing says peaceful night like a worm wiggling its way right into your brain. So, it's a dark and peaceful night when a rogue worm slithers its way into SpongeBob's head. That's so sick. He wakes up to find that his own body has become prime real estate for this worm, who SpongeBob promptly names Prickles. Yeah, discomfort didn't quite have the same ring. When Prickles sheds a few crocodile tears, SpongeBob can't kick him out and figures, hey, what's the harm in letting this thing stay in my head for just one night? However, Prickles wastes zero time before calling in his whole crew, turning SpongeBob's pores into the hottest club in town. Before he knows it, there's a worm rave happening inside his head. In his head. Meanwhile, Gary's patience has officially tapped out. When he realizes this worm infestation has gone full bed and breakfast, he straight up evicts SpongeBob from his own house, throwing out his pants and deodorant for good measure. Homeless and hygiene challenged, our spongy boy marches to the Krusty Krab with strict instructions to the worm party guests not to poke their heads out. But duh, they can't resist wreaking havoc, tossing trash onto the grill and making themselves right at home. The sight of these freeloading, trash-hurling worms is too much for Krabs, who fires SpongeBob on the spot. Now, SpongeBob is worm-ridden and jobless. Desperate, SpongeBob seeks help from his so-called friends, starting with Plankton, who immediately regrets agreeing to this worm removal mission. In an attempt that leaves Plankton bruised and battered, he taps out, leaving SpongeBob as a full-blown apartment complex for these slimy invaders.
You're on your own, worm boy.
And when SpongeBob begs Patrick to help him out, Patrick literally screams, "Oh, it's a monster with SpongeBob's voice!" and then slams the rock in SpongeBob's wormy face. Even Squidward isn't immune to the chaos. He hoses SpongeBob down in hopes of flushing these pests out, but to no avail. Back at home, poor SpongeBob finds that Gary has barricaded the house against him, leaving SpongeBob locked out of his own life. Finally, when SpongeBob is at rock bottom, renaming himself
SpongeBob Worm Pants.
he starts laughing like he's lost every last marble in his head. Ironically, this is what breaks Prickles and his crew, realizing they've driven SpongeBob fully mad and agree to finally move out, leaving SpongeBob worm-free and ready to hug his loyal, if ruthlessly strict, snail, Gary. These little parasites don't just disappear, though. They immediately infiltrate Squidward's house, setting up a new base camp and giving Squidward a nightmare of his own. So yeah, thanks to Patrick doing nothing and SpongeBob's enabling, Bikini Bottom now has a fresh worm problem. While Squidward's dealing with his new worm neighbors, it's SpongeBob's turn to freak out over an oral report, and Patrick's here to make sure things go from mildly awkward to grossly catastrophic. Oral report opens with SpongeBob at work at the Krusty Krab, sweating buckets because he's got an oral report due for boating school. He's freaking out about delivering it in front of a crowd, which is ironic considering his usual talkative self.
There once was a man from Nantucket. Oh, sorry, wrong one.
His anxiety isn't helped by the fact that the hungry customers at the Krusty Krab are practically turning into zombies, groaning and clawing at each other for food. Squidward chides SpongeBob for holding things up. SpongeBob realizes that he's got full-blown stage fright and now has to face his worst fear if he wants to pass his boating school report. So, who's he turned to? Naturally, Patrick. And here's where the chaos really kicks off. Patrick's first great idea is to tell SpongeBob to practice in front of him. Easy enough, right? Yeah, right.
Come on, SquarePants. Is this the best you can do?
When SpongeBob is lying in a shredded heap with Patrick yelling, "Speech! Speech! Speech! Speech!" and his eyes start... I don't even know how to describe this, y'all. That's when they decide to turn to Sandy for help. When they get to Sandy's, she diagnoses SpongeBob with oral reportitis, which, according to her, is a super serious condition that causes nerves so intense people explode if they don't chill out. Yikes, dude. Talk about a nervous breakdown much? match. The cure? A pair of custom-made goggles that make it look like everyone's in their underwear. SpongeBob's a little thrown, but desperate times call for desperate measures. Fast forward to the next day, and SpongeBob's up at the podium, clutching his notes like a lifeline while Patrick is watching like it's the cinema. His nerves are all over the place, and just when he thinks he's going to faint, he asks Patrick for the goggles. And somehow Patrick manages to hand them over, but not before breaking them while polishing them. SpongeBob, now donning broken goggles, looks around the classroom to see his classmates in their undies, and for a split second, his confidence skyrockets. He even starts laughing at everyone, which probably wasn't the most respectful reaction, but hey, he's relaxed. But as SpongeBob dives into his report, the broken goggles malfunction, transforming the scene from slightly awkward to full horror show. Suddenly, everyone's underwear starts making scary faces, complete with exaggerated fangs and glaring eyes. SpongeBob flips the out, screaming and bolting out of the classroom like he's in an actual horror movie. Instead of calming down, he jumps into Mrs. Puff's boat and floors it out of sheer panic, leaving a trail of destruction across Bikini Bottom. Patrick and Mrs. Puff chase him, but the police join in too because SpongeBob's chaotic escape turns into a reckless joyride through town. As the police finally corner him, they're about to lay down the law when SpongeBob blurts out an impromptu rant on boating safety. This speech ends up being so sincere and heartfelt that the police officers are moved to tears, completely forgetting he's in trouble. They let him off the hook, but Mrs. Puff, not so lucky. They remind her that as his teacher, she's technically responsible for SpongeBob's every fumbling move, so she's the one who ends up in handcuffs while SpongeBob gets off scot-free. Patrick naturally is thrilled, somehow convinced this whole mess was a success because SpongeBob conquered his fear. In one final Patrickism, he puts on the goggles to test out this underwear vision for himself, and when you know, he sees SpongeBob's underwear complete with a fierce glare yelling at him. Patrick, forever immune to shame but not to his own nonsense, bolts, leaving SpongeBob to face yet another day at boating school without his so-called support. You'd think Patrick had learned a thing or two about boundaries. Nope. In House Fancy, he's right in Squidward's living room, turning an innocent decorating spree into a surreal horror flick, complete with a toilet that has a meltdown. The episode starts with Squidward, blissfully unaware of the destruction ahead, tuning into his favorite show, House Fancy. As luck would have it, today's episode features none other than his rich, pretentious arch-nemesis, Squilliam Fancyson.
Well, Squiddy.
Squilliam wastes no time in calling up Squidward just to gloat, flaunting his multi-story mansion that comes with an elevator hot tub combo, a rooftop garden, golden toilet paper holders, and, because of course it does, a 130-foot unibrow sculpture made of gilded doorknobs. Just what the hell? Envy completely takes over Squidward's brain, and in a fit of pure ego, he calls up the host and brags that his home is way fancier than Squilliam's. The host, Nicholas, promptly decides to pop over to Squidward's fancy abode, giving Squidward a grand total of 2 hours to turn his dusty living room into a luxury palace. In panic mode, Squidward decides to enlist SpongeBob, who is conveniently spying on him outside the window, like always. But there's more. SpongeBob tells Squidward he's not operating at full capacity because Patrick borrowed his brain for the weekend. And for what? A couple of chocolate bars. In what sounds like the worst trade deal in history, Squidward agrees to let a literally brainless SpongeBob help redecorate. The results are predictably disastrous, from basic furniture rearranging to SpongeBob almost sawing Squidward's foot off. But hey, it wouldn't be a day in Bikini Bottom without a life-threatening injury or two. Just when Squidward thinks things can't get worse, the doorbell rings. Panicked, he figures it's Nicholas arriving early. He tells SpongeBob to tidy up with the vacuum while he goes to bandage his foot. SpongeBob, bless him, decides that vacuuming means cranking the vacuum's power to black hole level. Now Squidward's entire living room is a vacuum tube wasteland, and he's still bandaged up trying to pretend nothing's wrong. Enter Patrick.
Sorry, Squidward, I couldn't wait any longer. I gotta use your toilet. No questions.
And what does Patrick do with Squidward's restroom? Something so atrocious that the toilet literally grows legs and staggers out of the bathroom begging, "Please, please, someone put me out of my misery." Then this thing jumps into Squidward's arms, saying a final, "Have mercy on my soul," and immediately dies. Whatever happened there was so bad that it gave life to a toilet just to watch it perish in real time. And as if that's not nightmare fuel enough, Patrick waltzes back to the vacuum and shoves SpongeBob's brain back in there like he's delivering takeout. The vacuum explodes from the overload. The blast destroys Squidward's entire house, leaving nothing but rubble, dust, and shockwaves of disbelief. So when Nicholas and Squilliam finally show up, Squidward thinks he's doomed. But here's the twist. Nicholas, clearly an abstract art aficionado, takes one look at the ruins and declares it the pinnacle of home decor. I'm not gonna even comment here. Squidward's destroyed house is now the envy of the town, and Squilliam, whose multi-million-dollar mansion is now second-rate, collapses into tears. In a final act of what can only be called disturbingly bad judgment, SpongeBob tries to console Squilliam with helpful decorating tips, as if Squilliam's main issue is lack of chaos and not the crushing weight of defeat. With Squidward riding high on his bittersweet victory, we plunge into A Flea in Her Dome, where Patrick takes gross to a whole new level of bondage. Right out of the gate, we've got SpongeBob and Patrick bawling their eyes out because Sandy has been away in Texas for a whopping 2 days. To cope with this tragic loss, the two besties decide to surprise Sandy with a welcome back party in her tree dome. But when Sandy finally returns, the only surprise she brings is in the form of a hitchhiker, a tiny, mean-ass flea. Sandy explains her new uninvited guest with an itchy scratching spree and then, clearly over it, tells SpongeBob to grab her flea collar from her suitcase. But the flea gets loose, bouncing from Sandy to SpongeBob and then to Patrick, spreading itchy chaos and leaving both SpongeBob and Patrick literally clawing at the flea collar like it's a life raft. But dude Patrick grabs that collar. "It doesn't matter, this itching is killing me!" And he twists it around himself like the grossest bondage situation I've ever had to watch. Whoa boy, just calm down. Just when you think things are under control, this little guy calls for backup and suddenly Sandy's tree dome is overrun by an infestation. As if we needed more nightmare fuel, this flea army devours the collar in seconds, leaving our trio scratching in desperation with no escape in sight. Now, being Patrick, he's got to add a little insult to injury by blaming Sandy for bringing the flea in the first place, calling her gross and infested. Never mind that it's probably his own messiness that invited them over for the full feast. I mean, logic, people, logic. This welcome party has turned into a scratching, snapping brawl over who's most responsible for this skin-crawling infestation. Luckily, Sandy snaps back to reality and stops the fight, saying that unless they work together, they're flea food. At this point, Patrick throws out an idea, one that's peak Patrick. His plan? Build a tower to reach the top of the tree and pick an apple. After that fails, shockingly, Sandy and the gang take refuge up in the tree, but it's as hopeless as Patrick's logic because the fleas are crawling everywhere, ready to turn them into their next snack. SpongeBob looks around and figures they're swimming in fleas more than water now, which triggers Sandy's light bulb moment. She grabs a big old vat of salt water, crashing into the flea party and flooding the tree dome with briny, salty goodness. The fleas are drowned, and Sandy finally manages to reclaim her tree dome from the grip of these relentless invaders. By the end, every Bikini Bottom resident is stranded in the dome, soaked and itching for freedom. Just when you think Patrick couldn't be more of a disgusting menace, he ups the ante with a gift that leaves Bikini Bottom in an even gooier horror flick. Brace yourself for the gift of gum. So it's Best Friends Day, and Patrick decides to give SpongeBob a gift. What does he bring? An enormous, dripping, used wad of gum that he's been collecting for his entire life. He names it Gummy because clearly giving a gift that's basically a biohazard wasn't enough. He had to name it, too. SpongeBob tries to be polite about it. He even somehow thinks it's a better gift than the robot butler he's giving Patrick. But as soon as SpongeBob drags this monstrosity inside, he realizes he's made a colossal mistake. First, the smell hits him. Then there's the fact that it's basically a haunted house of horror. Pieces of dirty underwear crawl out, talking like they've got their own personalities. SpongeBob's freaked out and decides this toxic waste dump of a present has to go. pronto. But every time he tries to ditch it, Patrick catches him, convinced SpongeBob is just redecorating with it, or worse, trying to find the perfect spot for Gummy. So Patrick does him a favor by nailing Gummy right above SpongeBob's front door like some kind of grotesque holiday wreath. SpongeBob decides to make a sneaky late-night escape with the blob, but it goes sideways fast. The second he tries to pry Gummy off his house, he releases random fish that have somehow gotten stuck inside the wad. Oh my holy crap, that's just fucking gross, man. They just wriggle free and disappear like Gummy's been absorbing stray townsfolk over the years. And then, of course, SpongeBob gets himself totally glued into it. By the next morning, his house is coated in layers of sticky, unholy gum, with SpongeBob himself dangling from his own doorway like he's part of the mess. And then comes Sandy. She takes one look and decides it's time for some classic Texas problem solving. She lassos a piece of Gummy to a passing truck, thinking she can yank it away. Instead, the gum pulls her right back, slamming her into SpongeBob's house. Gummy explodes on impact, splattering gum across SpongeBob, Squidward, and even Patrick's house, trapping Squidward, Sandy, and SpongeBob in a sticky mess. Finally, SpongeBob's had it and tells Patrick he can have Gummy back, no questions asked. So Patrick eats it. Yep. He devours the entire thing, every nasty, bacteria-ridden morsel. Patrick hiccups a bubble so huge that it explodes, showering all of Bikini Bottom in a layer of chewed gum. It's everywhere, probably enough to condemn the entire town as a health hazard. But just when you think it can't get any weirder, Squidward's up next, showing off his art like he's unveiling some lost treasure, when honestly, it's more tragic than impressive. So we open up at Squidward's place, and he's just dying to show off his masterpiece, which, by the way, he's dragging out of his house like he's handling a relic from the Louvre. And of course, SpongeBob and Patrick are just there, ready to interrupt with all their chaotic enthusiasm. They invite him for a little arts and crafts time, and Squidward's response? He's got a fancy hat and the title of true artiste, which means he's way too good for glue sticks and macaroni. SpongeBob's over here showing off his basket weaving skills, whipping out a wallet, even money, because why not? Patrick? Let's just say he's putting the nail in the coffin of anything resembling art. Desperate for a win, SpongeBob shows Patrick how to glue googly eyes onto a rock, and just like that, Patrick creates a rock covered in eyes, saying, "Behold, I'm an artist!" Yes, it's as googly as it sounds. And it only gets better when an actual art critic shows up, absolutely roasting Squidward's hideous sculpture, swipes his hat, and then takes one look at Patrick's googly rock and loses his mind. He's handing out compliments and cash like it's payday. Squidward's reaction? You can practically hear his soul cracking as he mutters,
Well, Betty won't sell another one of those ridiculous trinkets.
while watching Patrick's so-called art blow up. And he's proven wrong within seconds as Patrick racks up sales one after the other until Squidward's ready to ditch the whole art dream and hide at work. But it doesn't stop there. Now that Patrick's a Bikini Bottom celebrity, he's running low on rocks and starts attempting real art. A landscape painting? Nah, that's lame. A sculpture? Stinks. He's got standards, okay? He wanders over to the Krusty Krab for some art advice, which somehow Mr. Krabs has decided to sell for a hot $25. Squidward, now forced into helping Patrick, is like, just focus on your burger. And that, people, is all the inspiration Patrick needs to slap googly eyes on a Krabby Patty and call it art. The customers, they're eating it up. Literally. It's the new fad and everyone's scrambling for a googly patty. Even Mr. Krabs can hear the cash register singing until he realizes Patrick's raking in $50 a patty while SpongeBob just hands them over for $3. By the end, Krabs decides to make Squidward Patrick's assistant, which has to be Squidward's personal nightmare come true. He's gluing googly eyes and sprinkling glitter under Patrick's watchful eye, who casually tells him he might be an artist one day, but probably not. And Squidward, he just loses his shit, bursting into tears while Patrick struts off as Bikini Bottom's finest artist of the year. This starfish is straight up disgusting. Enough said. But hey, I'm just a guy who likes cartoons. Catch you in the next video.